It sounds there's like static in behind your audio. It could just be me. Does anybody else get that?
Is can you hear me okay or
I can hear you, but there's like a static running in behind your voice. But again,
is
I
that,
don't know if it's just me.
how's everybody else?
There's a little bit, but not
I
bad.
can hear a little bit.
Okay, let me try something else here. Hang on. Ah, try this.
Oh, better.
How's that? Better?
Yeah.
Okay. So it all depends on the mic that I'm using. Our AV problem. But thanks for letting me know that. Okay. So, welcome everybody. And oh, there's some more people joining in. Just give them a couple minutes to join in. Welcome. I hope you've had a good week. I've been a little busy, but that's okay. So finally, we are getting to the Shoshinge, which is what we were supposed to be doing from November. But it's been a long introduction, and but you're all okay with that. So I wanted to actually start off today. There was a question, email question during the week, and I wanted to just share with you about one individual was asking about um, the fact that I had mentioned at one point about the 84,000 paths to enlightenment and how we as or the Buddha acknowledges or recognizes that there are many different paths to enlightenment. And the comment was to do with there are people in this day and age who um, will say that they are spiritual and not religious. And is there anything wrong with that? And to take the best parts from all the different religions. And the question was, is there anything wrong with that, or should one follow one religion? Well, first of all, let me say that or Amida Buddha, and we had mentioned this before in the whole sacred story of Amida Buddha. There is it starts off with the Buddha not being the Buddha, but as being a king of a kingdom, and he comes across the Avalokiteshvara Buddha. Avalokiteshvara? Wait, what is Kanno? So, he comes across the 53rd Buddha, and I'm just drawing a blank here. Was it Avalokiteshvara or?
I believe if it's Kannon, it is.
No, yeah, that's Kannon. So it's not Kannon, it's the other one. And it just slipped my mind right now.
Sorry.
The 53rd Buddha. Hello?
Oh,
Somebody?
Lokasvara Raja?
Lokasvara Raja Buddha. Lokasvara Raja? Anyways, the 53rd Buddha, and he's so moved by the Buddha that he forgoes his kingdom and he asks to be his disciple or to study under him. And he is shown all the Buddha lands that could be seen. And at that point, he makes a vow to take all the best parts from the various Buddha lands to create his own Pure Land. And he makes these vows. So from that perspective, we can say that Amida Buddha took the best parts of all the other Buddhas. But there's a big difference between comparing Amida Buddha and ourselves. Okay. And the major difference being that when we try to take the best parts from all the different religions, the fear that is in that is that we may take the parts that are more inclined to myself. So it can become ego driven, if you will. So I will only do the things that I like. So you don't really have true, deep reflection in that situation. So the analogy often used is when you have a mountain with many different paths leading to the summit. It's okay for you to go from path to path to path at the base of the mountain, but eventually, if you want to get to the summit, you have to choose a path that is right for you and start climbing that path. If you keep on going from path to path to path, you never reach the summit. So the I guess fear or harm or caution against this idea of spirituality versus following a religious path is that it can be very egocentric. So one can say, I'm spiritual, but what you're saying is, I'm just doing things that make me feel good. And so that can be, as I said, egocentric. So that's the one caution I would say about that. I don't think there's anything wrong with viewing other religions and acknowledging the wonderful aspects of other religions. But if you find the path that is right for you, this is my path, and go along that path, I think is an important aspect. Okay. So I wanted to just start off today with that. And then now I wanted to share with you. Okay. Can you all see that on your screens? I think you can. Okay, so this is, of course, the Shoshin Nembutsuge, the formal title or the hymn of true Shinjin and Nembutsu. And as we have been leading up to it, of course, why did Shinra write his true teaching practice and attainment of the Pure Land Way? And of course, it was one, to express his gratitude to encountering the teachings of Amida Buddha, but also it was a way of him validating the Pure Land teachings. So he had written this in a very difficult way. It was read by the learned, so other monks from other schools. And so this is where, within this true teaching practice and attainment of the Pure Land Way, under the chapter of practice, at the end of it is where we have this song, Shoshinge. And last week we did, there's a preface to this verse, the preface that we went over last week. And as part of that, so I mentioned, okay, here. Okay. So this is actually quite a common way of understanding or viewing the Jodo Shinshu teachings. It's a schematic way of looking at it. So basically, it's differentiating the three Pure Land Sutras. And so the three Pure Land Sutras are right here at the top, we have Bussetsu Daimuryo Jukyo in Japanese, or the larger Skavati Vyuha Sutra in Sanskrit, or I guess the largest sutra on Amida is in English. And then we have the Bussetsu Kammuryo Jukyo in Japanese, or the Contemplation Sutra. And finally, the Bussetsu Amida Kyo, Amida Kyo, or the smaller Skavati Vyuha Sutra, or the Amida Sutra. We're most familiar with this Amida Sutra. It is the one that we often chant. Usually for here, we used to chant it more commonly at our monthly memorial services, but when we went to Zoom, it was a little bit longer, so we haven't been chanting it as much as we have previously. And the reason why we don't normally chant this Daimuryo Jukyo, or the larger sutra, it takes about 2.5 hours to chant the complete chanting. And I don't think I would get that many attendees if I said we're going to chant this today. Some of you might be dedicated enough to join, but I think by and large, most people don't. However, we do chant parts of this sutra. Of course, we chant the Sambutsuge and the Jusege. Both are within this larger sutra on Amida. You'll notice that they all start off in Japanese, Bussetsu. Bussetsu. Bussetsu means the teaching by the Buddha. Okay, it was taught by the Buddha. So that's why it starts off Bussetsu and then Daimuryo Jukyo. Bussetsu Kammuryo Jukyo. Bussetsu Amida Kyo. So often you'll see it without this Bussetsu, it'll just say Amida Kyo or Daimuryo Jukyo. Okay. And why you say, is this important to have this Bussetsu in front? It's a lot of it has to do with the Mahayana and the Theravada Buddhism, because Theravada looked at the Mahayana teachings as being later teachings, and there was question as to whether they are actually been told by the historical Buddha. And so that's why the Mahayana school put this in front of their sutras to say this was a teaching by the Buddha. Okay, so you'll find they'll have Bussetsu on it. So within these 3 sutras, there is an emphasis on particular vows within the 48 vows that comes up in the larger sutra. And so the larger sutra itself, its primary vow is the 18th vow. That is the vow of sincere mind and entrusting heart. And the Kammuryo Jukyo, or Contemplation Sutra, it's focused on what we call the 19th vow. And the 19th vow was the one that said, doing various meritorious acts in order to into the Pure Land, but you end up going into this borderland, provisional land, right? And the reason why this sutra is said to focus on this 19th vow is if we look at the whole story of the Contemplation Sutra, it's about the tragedy at Rajagriha, where Queen Vaidehi is the main audience of Shakyamuni Buddha, and he's giving her visualization techniques in order to visualize the Pure Land, and of course, Amida Buddha within the Pure Land. And so that's why it said that this Contemplation Sutra is based on the 19th vow, doing various meritorious acts. And then the smaller sutra, Bussetsu Amida Kyo, is said to focus on the 20th vow. And the 20th vow is the one that says you focus basically on just reciting the Nembutsu. But it's still reciting the Nembutsu with a self-power motivation, like I am creating merit by reciting this Nembutsu. And so again, they also go into the borderland. So these are the three vows. And there has been an argument within Jodo Shinshu that one has to go through a procession from the 19th to the 20th, and then to the 18th. And that's with this Sangmon, the next line, the Sangmon, or three gates. Okay, so there's an explanation that when we do the various acts with the desire to be born in a pure land, it's like entering the outside gate of say a mansion. Or if we go back to traditional Japanese houses, there's usually an outside gate, and then there's an inner courtyard, and then you come into what we call the Shinmon, the true gate. So you're getting closer to the essence as you progress, and then finally you get to the universal vow gate. Okay, so there's been an argument, especially in the Edo period, whether or not one has to go through this process. Okay, so there's some teachers that have mentioned arguments like, if you tell a person that has no money and is struggling to make ends meet, that, you know, if you have a very wealthy person who has succeeded in life, and they turn around and tell this person, you know what, money isn't everything. Well, that doesn't mean anything to that person who has no money and is struggling. So until they go through their own process, they may not realize that ultimate reality. Okay. It's also, I guess, another one is when parents say to their children, you'll never know what it's like to be a parent until you become a parent, right? And for the kids, they don't really understand that until they go through their process, and then they realize, oh, this is what being a parent is like, right? So there has been an argument that, you know, you need to go through this process. And in fact, when you look at the temples, they're very much based this way. When you go into a temple, you have to go through an initial gate. If you've gone to any temples in Japan, there's usually a very large gate. Okay. And then you get into the hondo, or usually there's a, you know, the doors of the hondo. And then inside that hondo, there's usually, not like our temple here, but usually, the Vancouver temple is a good example. There's actually another sliding door in front of the onaiji. So there's a process that you go through as you get deeper and deeper into it. However, interestingly enough, this argument of do we need to go through this process? One can go through this process, but one can also instantaneously come to this one as well. So I think most of us, we do need to go through a process, but it's not saying you have to go through a process. In other words, they talk about, for instance, oh, my phone is speaking to me. I don't know. Sorry, I don't know what's going on. My phone is starting to speak to me. Anyways, yeah. So you know, there are cases where somebody meets somebody and instantaneously they are awakened. Right. A good example of that is this person here, Tanwan Donnan. Okay. So Tanwan Donnan was apparently quite a physically weak child when he was little. And so he wanted to find a way to have longevity. And so he started following the Taoist practice. And through that, feeling that he will have a long life. But it's said that Tan Wan, one day he encounters Bodhi Rishi, from the Indian monk who introduced Buddhism to China. Now, this is all legendary, of course, but he says he meets up with him, and they both share what their teaching is about. And Tan Wan tells him about how he's going to have longevity through his teachings, and it said that Bodhi Rishi spits and says, "Chih, is that all your teaching tells you?" And he gives them the 3 Pure Land teachings, and instantly Tan Wan becomes a devout Pure Land follower. So in this case here, oops, let me get back to that. In this case here, no, this one. Yeah. In this case here, Tan Wan instantly awoke to this universal vow, the workings of Amida Buddha. And so he didn't have to really go through this process. Although some might say his following the Taoist practice was ultimately his process himself. He was seeking to begin with, right? So, but these are what we call the 3 gates. And then the 3 vesicles. These are, let's see, 3 vesicles. I'm going to actually skip this one. I can't remember what that one was. And then the 3 categories of sentient beings, right? So again, these are saying, like, if you're doing all the various practices to acts to enter the Pure Land, you might think you've attained something, but it's not complete attainment, and so it's called falsely settled. And then as you go further into the Nembutsu, just reciting Nembutsu, you begin to see a little more clarity. And finally, you get to a point where you just let go and you're in the rightly settled. And then the last one here is the San Ojo. And this I mentioned last week. Remember how the birth, following the various meritorious acts, is like when you pass away, you see the historical Buddha when he passed away at the Sala Grove at Kushinagra, and you see that in front of you. So that's why they call it the birth in the Sala Groves. And then the 20th one is one that's a birth that's difficult to conceive, but nonetheless, you could still conceive of it. And then the larger sutra is the inconceivable birth. And it's here that you realize that really I have no business being born in the Pure Land because of my egocentric self. And yet it's because of the working of Amida Buddha that I'm allowed to be born. And so this is really one that's beyond our acceptance or conceptualization. So, and yet we are allowed to be born or attain enlightenment. So this is one way of breaking down these 3 Pure Land Sutras. It's a common way of looking at them. And even if you just get the names of these sutras and then the vows that they're talking about, and the fact that there is a thought of this process. So another way of explaining these gates, and I've done this before in other talks, and you may have remembered me, is like there's an example of a insect that's within a bamboo tree, right? and it wants to get out of this bamboo tree. So if you know how bamboo works, they have nodes along the way, right? So the difficult path would be for the insect to crawl up, chew its way through the node, and then keep on going up. And, every time it comes to a node, they would have to chew a hole and then go further. Okay. However, there's another insect that sees that, in fact, on the other side of the node, there is already a hole there. So rather than chewing its way through, it goes through the holes that are in the nodes. So it makes it a little bit easier for it to go up. Okay. Yet there's another one that realizes that there's actually a hole at the side of the base of the bamboo. And so it just has to go out sideways and it gets out instantly. Okay. So the example here, the analogy here is that the 18th vow in a way is like going out sideways. Okay? Whereas the 19th vow is this chewing through each node, and the 20th vow is going through the holes that are in each node. So when you look at it, it's much more instantaneous to go out sideways. You don't have to go through each of the sections of the bamboo. Okay, so that's also a way of thinking or thinking about it. Okay. So now when we look at the Shoshinge itself, okay, the title Shoshinge or Shoshin Nembutsuge means the hymn of true Shinjin and Nembutsu. And remember in the preface of this, it said that there's true practice and true Shinjin. And of course, the true practice was the Nembutsu reciting of the name of the Buddha. And the true Shinjin is the entrusting to Amida Buddha. And so that's where this title, what it means. And then we chant the Shoshinge, as I've mentioned before, that when Shinran was alive and even after he passed away for several hundred years, they were still practicing older chants. They weren't practicing things written by Shinran Shoni. And so, in fact, they were chanting Shantao's, Zendo Daishi's chant, what we call the Raisan, Ojo Raisan. And so when, of course, Shinran, so it was when Renyo Shonin, the 8th abbot of Jodo Shinshu, realized that we need to chant something that is simpler. The Ojo Raisan is broken up into 6 parts and they chant it 6 times a day. And then rather than doing that, just have services twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening. And so the daily chant would include the chanting of the Shoshinge. And then added to that, there's what we call the Wasan. Wasan are a series of poems that Shinran wrote in his latter years, where the Shoshinge is written in classical Chinese or Kambun. The true teaching, practice, and attainment of the Pure Land Way was all written in this classical Chinese that only the learned could really read. The Wasan were poems that Shinran wrote in his latter years that were written for the average person. So at the end of chanting Shoshinge every day, we chant 6 different wasans, right? And if you go to Japan, we chant the 6 same wasans here all the time, but in Japan, every day they do 6 different ones. And there's a total of 280 or something. So they go through every day 6 different ones. And the reason why they chant 6 different wasans is homage to the chanting that they used to do with the Shantao or Zendo's chanting, which I mentioned was broken up into 6 different times, that they would chant 6 different times. So that's why, sort of as a homage to that, they chant 6 different wasan or poems every day at the end of chanting the Shoshinge. When we go through our ordination, we have to be able to chant these wasan, and so they are quite melodic in chanting, and we have to know which ones they are. We don't have to have it memorized, but we have to be able to read the notes to say how it's being chanted. Okay, so that's the Shoshinge. But the Shoshinge part, we actually have to memorize it for our ordination. So the actual Shoshinge itself has each line has 7 characters with 2 lines making up 1 verse, and there's 120 lines in 60 verses. Okay. And if we look at this schematically, it is broken down like this. So the Shoshinge title is broken down, first of all, into 2 major categories. The very first thing that Shinran does, we call it the Soul-sang, or the adoration of Amida Buddha. And it's actually the very first 2 lines of the Shoshinge, Shoshin Nembutsuge. And it is the lines that says, take refuge in the Buddha of immeasurable life, and then take refuge in the Buddha of inconceivable light. Okay. Let me just. So in this red book by Hawaii, in here it says they've translated it a little bit different, but they say, in trust in the working of limitless life, bow to the light that surpasses all thought. Okay? In trust in the working of limitless life, bow to the light that surpasses all thought. In the Buddhist or in Japanese language, what you'll find is, unlike English, where we need subject and object, we don't need subject. So, Kimyo, Muryo, Junyo, Rai. It doesn't say I take refuge or you take refuge. It just says take refuge in the Buddha of immeasurable life. And it is said that this is sort of the wish of Amida Buddha. So you can say I take refuge, but it is more the wish of Amida Buddha to have sentient beings take refuge in the Buddha. So this is the interesting heart part. But we also call this a profession of faith, and this is Shinran expressing his innermost feelings to take refuge in the Buddha of immeasurable life, as well as the Buddha of inconceivable light. And I've shown you a diagram or before of vertical and horizontal axis, where the vertical axis is time, and the immeasurable life is talking about infinite time. So the Buddha of infinite time, it's the life that's gone before us, but also the life that goes after us. And we are a point on that continuum. And then the inconceivable light is talking about the spatial relation. So this is the horizontal axis, spanning the 10 quarters. Throughout the universe, this light shines. So you have both vertical and horizontal. And where we are is right at that cross section between the vertical and the horizontal. And the Buddha's working is working on me at this instant, right at this cross section. So everything that we do affects the future, but we're also being affected by things of the past. And everything that we do has a ripple effect horizontally. And so everything we do affects the world around us as well. Right? So when we think of it that way, the infinite and the present come together through the working of the Buddha. We are made aware of that. Okay, so these two are for Shinran the most important. Of course, this is the two bases of Amida Buddha. Because in Sanskrit, amitayus, mita is to measure, makes it is a negative, so immeasurable, and use is life. And so the Buddha of immeasurable life, and then Amitabha, immeasurable, and Ba is light. So Buddha of immeasurable light, inconceivable light. It's beyond, when we think about it too, we can't really look directly at light like the sunlight. Otherwise, we burn our eyes out. So light is so strong, it's beyond our conceptualization. And it is said to be stronger than the sun and the moon because it is the light of wisdom that shows our inner self. The sun and moon can only show our physical self, but the light of the Buddha reaches within ourselves. Okay? So then from there, if we go back to the schematic diagram, this is the adoration of Amida Buddha, the very beginning. Then he goes into the teachings after that. So first of all, he says, he professes his faith, says this is what Shinran is basically stating, is to encourage the Buddha of infinite light and life. And then he goes into the teachings, and the teachings are broken down into two halves. So the Ikkyodan, or veneration of Pure Land Sutras, and the Eshakudan, or veneration of the seven masters. So this is a very typical way of all Buddhist schools. What they will do is they'll say, okay, here is the source material. Source material meaning the teachings of the Buddha. Okay, so you start off by that, and then you support that source material by saying, listen, these are these great teachers down throughout history that have said that this teaching is very important. Okay, so you start off with the teaching itself, the source material, which is the teachings of the Buddha, and for Pure Land schools, it's the three Pure Land Sutras in particular that are important. So Shina starts off with this portion. And that, again, is further broken out into two halves. Okay? And how that is broken down is the first half is talking about the story of Amida Buddha. Okay? So he starts off by saying Bodhisattva Dharmakara in his causal state. And again, that is a reference directly to the larger sutra on Amida. Yes, it's right here. Sorry. He talks about the fact that in the Bodhisattva Dharmakara in his causal state sought Lokeshvara Raja, the Buddha, 53rd Buddha, and he learned the causes and conditions of each Buddha land. He's shown all of them, and he studied their inhabitants and qualities, and then using this as his foundation, he makes a supreme aspiration, awakening, the great vow, all embracing, vast, and rare. So then he goes through ages of reflection and completing the vows. And once he does that, he reaffirms that his name, the calling name, will be heard everywhere. And then he radiates his light, radiates the light of the Buddha. For some of you that were here on Saturday, we had our guest minister, Ochi Sensei, gave a lecture on the 12 lights. These are 12 different versions of calling Amida Buddha. And let me see if I can bring up that page. Just bear with me for 2 seconds here. Where did I put that? Okay, this was Ochi Sensei's lecture, and in that lecture, he talked about the 12 different lights, right? And these are actually, there are many more than 12. There's 37 different ways of describing the light of the Buddha. And, this one is actually not just light, but different names of calling the Buddha. But in there are many that are talking about light itself, immeasurable light, true and real light, boundless light. And of these, some of these are listed in the Shoshinge. So, let's see what it is. So light of joy and wisdom is one, right? Light of wisdom. So what kind of light do you think is light of? Well, let's look at these lights, the 12 lights. Immeasurable light, we've said, inconceivable light, beyond our conceptualization. Boundless light, so that one is continuous, and unhindered light, there's nothing that can get in its way. Oh, I think he listed them here. Yeah. He listed them in Japanese. Okay. Lord of blazing light is the ultimate. There's no comparison. He's the ultimate light. Light of purity. Light of joy. How would you express light of joy? What would light of joy be? Why joy? Anyone? What do you think? Did I put you on the spot asking a question? It's of course the joy of our ignorance being, I guess, not quelling our ignorance, but even seeing our ignorance. And when we have something that goes beyond our ignorance, there's a joy that comes out from that. Light of wisdom, uninterrupted light, incomparable light, inexpressible light, light that surpasses sun and moon, inconceivable light. So these are the 12 lights often referred to as. And he went through the singing of this gatha that we did together. But so there's various descriptions here, and I will go into it in more detail coming up, but just to give you the breakdown of it. So there's a story of Amida Buddha, and then following that, there's a section of Shakyamuni Buddha encouraging the Nembutsu teachings. And then he comes to the seven great Pure Land masters. So the second part of this, so you have the Pure Land Sutras, and that's divided into the story of Amida Buddha and then Shakyamuni encouraging those to follow the teachings. So he used in this second part, the story of Amida Buddha is the largest sutra, and then the others, the Shakyamuni Buddha's encouragement, he uses like the Contemplation Sutra, etc., to encourage people to the Nembutsu teachings. And then the second part, as I mentioned, he then, once he said this is the supreme teaching, then he brings out the seven patriarchs and explains about each of their teachings and how they furthered or gave proof, if you will, to the gave proof to the fact the Pure Land teachings as being the true teachings. So within this section on the seven patriarchs, he starts off with sort of an introduction, and then he goes on to talk about each individual great master, and ultimately at the end he comes to a conclusion. So this is sort of how the Shoshinge is broken down. If we want to put it differently, I suppose this could actually go above this Josan or the Josan. The introduction could actually go above the seven patriarchs, and then this Kesan, the conclusion, could actually go underneath it. So maybe it should have gone sideways like this. But yeah, so we'll get into that next time. I will start off going into the largest sutra and talking about what he says in the Shoshinge. So the Shoshinge in this very concise 120 lines, 60 verses, he basically summarizes the whole of Jodo Shinshu teaching. And of course, he uses this as a connection between what the right practice is and the right, the true Shinjin, or the entrusting heart. So next week, I'm going to start off going into the actual text itself. And I already started some of that, but we'll go further into that. Are there any questions at this time? Let me just stop sharing and go. Okay. Questions, anyone? No questions? That's not a good sign. um, again, please feel free to email me questions during the week. We will go into what I will do is I will send the text of the Shoshinge to you, and then we'll go through it as next week, line by line. But I wanted to give you sort of a breakdown, an overview of how it's broken down this week, and then we'll go into each line.
That was a really nice chart that you had there. Very
Yeah,
easy to-
I'll send that out. I think I sent it out last week,
Okay,
but I will send it out again if you need it.
that's
No, this
プ
is
リ
a
ントアウトしてない
this is
の
the first time I face the actual structure of detailed structure of 新書協業新書。
Oh.
商品芸
Oh, yes.
念仏。
うん
小念仏芸。
昇進。
念仏芸のストラクチャーね。
Mm. Yeah. So, but this is actually a very traditional way of doing. You'll find it in all other schools of Buddhism as well. In fact, I'm trying to think what year was that. It might have been around 2000. Was it 2012 or 13? Some of us actually had the good opportunity. The Dalai Lama was in town, and we got to go see the Dalai Lama. And he gave a little bit more in-depth talk. And what he did, his talk was he, just like what Shinran did, he actually went back in time to validate the Tibetan Buddhist teaching by bringing out these different masters and saying this is what they taught and this is why this is important. And so it's a very traditional way in Buddhism is to bring from the time of Shakyamuni Buddha down to the present why this is true and real teaching, because these great masters have also brought up points and added to it to make it to pass it down to us. So it was interesting that the Dalai Lama did the very same thing. Is that he did that with, and he included. So in there, one of the great masters he included was in fact Nagarjuna, and Nagarjuna is recognized vastly as, well, he's said to be the father of Mahayana Buddhism, and so many different schools will recognize him in their lineage.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's interesting that you bring up the Dalai Lama, because when I went to see him too, what impressed me so much is that I grew up on these teachings. It was just so amazing to think, wow, these are the same as our teachings. I mean, of course it is, but they have a bit of a different slant, but it was so exciting for me to realize the connection.
Yeah, and it is. When you start delving into it, there's so many connections. And in fact, one of the interesting aspects is the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So in Tibet, when a person passes away, literally, I don't think they do it as much now, but literally, the individual is kept where they pass away for 49 days. And what the Tibetan Book of the Dead is, the monks go there and they read from this Book of the Dead, and it's almost like your guide to what you're going through. So you're changing over what they call bardos, or you're going from this life to the next life. And the Tibetan Book of the Dead is the guide for the person, saying this is what you're going through, and then leading them. But in the end, ultimately, what's interesting is they tell them that you will now see the light of Amida. So it ends up at the end with Amida, which I find very fascinating that they do that. So, but there is similarities. But what my impressions when we saw when I went to see Dalai Lama, unfortunately, because I'm ordained clergy, they invited me up on the stage with all the other monks, and we had to sit on the floor. And it was very uncomfortable for me because it was a long session, and I'm not used to sitting on the floor anymore. Unfortunately, our family genetics is very bad. I think it comes from my father's side, but both my brothers and I, we can't sit cross-legged, like the lotus position. Our hips our bones don't work that way. We're very rigid. So I found it very difficult. Anyways, that you didn't need to hear that, I suppose. So if there are no further questions, and again, please feel free to email me throughout the week. But we will meet up next week, next Tuesday.
それが出てくるね。釈迦の教えで。
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sensei. Good night.
Very much.
Bye.
Night.
Have a
Good night.
week.
Bye-bye.
You too.